Good afternoon. I'm Tom Jones. I'm the Executive Director of the Faith Inclusion Network, and I want to welcome you to our webinar on family support. For those of you that don't know about the Faith Inclusion Network, we're a nonprofit that helps faith communities include people with disabilities, providing training, consultation, resources, curriculum guides, things like that. Our job is to help faith communities be successful as they provide a faith home and a place where people with disabilities and their families can belong. So check us out if you're interested in more at faithinclusionnetwork.org. Today, I'm very, very excited because family support is something that's been really near and dear to my heart. I grew up with epilepsy and saw how it affected the whole family, uh, siblings, parents, and so uh, disability. Everybody experiences disability and is affected by it. And as we think about how people with disabilities are included in faith communities, that's really great that we do that. But also, how do our faith communities, how are they able to support the family members and provide the family members the inclusion, the empathy, and supports that they need to feel a part of that faith community? So we have some really great speakers on our panel today, and I will invite Rebecca Wolf. Rebecca is Finn's Interfaith Engagement and Faith Inclusion Coordinator. And so she will introduce our guests and introduce our panelists today.
Thanks, Tom. We do have some great speakers today, and they are Topher and Jerry and Nada. I'll start with Topher first. Topher, well, Reverend Dr. Topher Endres, he earned his Master's of Divinity from Vanderbilt Divinity School in Nashville, Tennessee, in 2015, and also his PhD from University of Aberdeen in Scotland, in the UK, in 2021. He's written on disability theology and accompaniment theology and uh, been in a number of journals and written some book chapters. And his first book was published just last month. So we're going to be talking about that today as well. Excited to hear more about the book. Topher has a passion for inclusion and justice and loves collaborating with churches and ministries on ways to welcome more people, including he spearheaded a disability advocacy and inclusion project through the Disciples of Christ movement. So excited to have you here, Topher. And now let's talk about Jerry. Jerry is a licensed clinical social worker working as a consultant, assisting clients in non-for-profit, philanthropic, and educational sectors. Her specific expertise is in program development on behalf of people with disabilities and older adults and other vulnerable populations. She has experience in grant writing and advocacy, in addition to teaching and coaching. In terms of disability, throughout her career, Jerry has focused on people with disabilities of all ages and all stages and their families. She led an early intervention team at the Hebrew Academy for Special Children that treated children ages 3 and under, and created a social recreational program for adults with disabilities at the Greater Five Towns Y on Long Island. And as an agency executive at the Samuel Field YM and YWHA for 16 years, Jerry was on the forefront of developing innovative programs and services for people with disabilities, including parent support programs and respite programs for children with autism, summer camps for children who are deaf and hearing impaired, as well as a variety of after-school programs for neurodivergent youth. Most recently, Jerry served as an inclusion specialist for UJA Federation of New York, the Synagogue Inclusion Program. It's a Jewish inclusion program working to promote inclusive practices, and led parent support groups for parents of teens and young adults, and worked as a member of a team for SIB Space, which is a project led by the Meyerson JCC in New York City to support adult siblings of people with disabilities. So Jerry has so much expertise. We're really excited that you can be here. And finally, we have Nada Mary from Musson. She serves as the regional lead for Musson, which is a Muslim disability advocacy organization. Muslims Understanding and Helping Special Education Needs is the official acronym. And she's a member of the board of directors at the Akram Joma Islamic Center, which is the largest Islamic center in Western Canada. Nada is a very committed social activist who has devoted her life to promoting community development and activism. She has a rich background in community engagement and public education. She's deeply passionate about reaching out to the most marginalized and at-risk individuals in our community. And over the past 15 years, Nada has actively served her community by providing support to school boards and individuals with disabilities and advocacy organizations. She's been instrumental in developing and implementing strategies and initiatives that aim to create diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces. So thank you so much, Nada, for being here too from Canada.
Thank you.
And I'll let Tom explain a little more about the topics we're going to be covering today.
Thank you, Rebecca. And so, what we'll be doing today is posing a few questions to everyone on our panel, and we'll give everyone will have a chance to respond. And so, we have such a diverse group of people from different faith backgrounds, and all of you have had different types of experience with people with disabilities and their families. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about your thoughts and your experiences. So from your experience, what are some of the challenges that families with people with disabilities face? You know, sometimes we just don't, unless you've been there, you don't really realize the challenges that are there unless you've walked in their shoes. And so, what is it that you've found that are really some basic challenges that every family faces? And if you just jump in if you'd like, or I can call on you, either way. Nada?
Yes, yes. So I can answer this. So families and individuals with disabilities face several challenges, including physical barriers that hinder mobility and access, such as inaccessible building structures and inadequate facilities. Additionally, social barriers like ableism, discrimination, culturally produced stigma, really discourages participation in our community activities, leading to feelings of shame and isolation. Sometimes these barriers impact self-esteem, mental health, both individuals and disabilities and their families, making it, really difficult for them to engage fully in society and community. And lack of belonging and not having access to participation can really affect families, individuals' emotional, spiritual, and mental well-being. I always reflect on this and I tell people, if we've learned anything the past 5 years, experiencing, especially for myself in the pandemic, during COVID-19, I'm a very extroverted person, so that was very difficult for me to be very isolated. Exclusion can be disabling. And, when we had the pandemic, the world got to see the perspective of what many of these families face on a daily, which is a lot of isolation.
Okay. Yes, that isolation is certainly a tough one to overcome, and as you said, has some deep effects in a lot of different areas of a person's life.
I couldn't agree more that isolation is a critical issue. When I would speak with parents and grandparents of children with disabilities, they would say many times that it's not the disability themselves itself that was making them so sad. They embraced and loved their child unconditionally for what their child was and was committed to trying to help their child be everything that child could be. But the concept of possibly being outside of their community, was there going to be a birthday party? Were they going to be part of their religious community? Were in the Jewish tradition, would they have a bar mitzvah at age 13? Was that going to happen for them? And that is the source of their anguish at that point in time.
Okay. Yeah. Different ways it affects us. Topher.
Again, could not agree more with Nada and Jerry, that I think this is, if not universal, it's certainly happening in all of our traditions, the sense of isolation. I think I'd add one other foil to this, which is the sense of uncertainty that so many families hold when they go into a faith community. There is less certainty that they will get to participate, that they will be asked to be a part of the community in meaningful ways, that they will get to experience that sense of belonging, and uncertainty that they will be cared for in the fullness of that faith tradition, both in the practical sense, uncertainty that they'll be able to physically access things, and the ritualistic rite access. Can they do a baptism? Can they do a communion? But also that sense of uncertainty of, are the people around me going to be safe? Are they going to share things that are theologically damaging and harming my family? Are they going to say things about my child or my sibling or my parent that make this an unwelcoming, unsafe place for me spiritually and emotionally? So I think that sense of uncertainty, that you never know if that community is going to truly be welcoming in every manner, is another aspect that can really harm families.
That's a good point, Topher. And that uncertainty, I think, keeps a lot of people from going to a church or mosque or synagogue or faith community, not knowing what's going to happen and how people are going to react or what type of supports are available. So all good insights there. Now, one thing I wanted to ask each one of you about your faith tradition is, how does your faith tradition view the family, and especially those families of people with disabilities? What value, I guess, does your faith tradition have for people, for the families, the family unit? Uh, just go ahead and jump in if you like, or
Yeah, I can go first if you're okay with that, Tom. I'm just
sure.
gonna, okay. So I would say in ours, like families are really encouraged to provide care and support, recognizing that, individuals with disabilities are valued members of our community and families. And I would say our tradition teachings emphasize the importance of treating them with dignity and respect and fostering an environment of love and understanding, right? Creating safe spaces. Moreover, I would say families are seen as a support system, right? Responsible for, advocating for their loved ones, ensuring that they receive accommodations and opportunities to thrive. And our faith tradition also highlights the collective duty of community, right? Community to uplift and empower those who are, differently abled. Ultimately, family support is viewed as, an imperative aspect of nurturing and respecting all members of society and broader commitment, to equity. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Um, that support that people feel when they go to a faith community as a family, I think it's just hugely important. Jerry, do you have anything you'd like to add from the Jewish perspective?
So, I think, Tom, would this be a good time for me to just share the two concepts?
Sure.
Sure. So I thought it might be good to share a couple of just a couple of perspectives that you might find helpful when thinking about the I don't think I have a share. Let me see. No, I don't have a share icon to be able to share. Oh, there it is. I do. Hmm. Can you see what I'm seeing right now or not? This?
Well, I'm seeing the Zoom.
No? Um,
You may have to
sorry.
open it.
So
There,
sorry.
there you go.
Okay. So there are just a couple of concepts, and I think we'll probably find it in each of the faith traditions that are here. And I'm so curious to hear the words coming from Topher and Nada as well. But we begin with in the image of God, that the concept of God created humankind in God's image, B'Tselem Elohim. So that is a core value that emphasizes the inherent dignity and value of all human beings, that every person is created with a unique and sacred quality worthy of respect and compassion. And that is that literally when I see another person, I'm seeing a face of God. And however that person is, that is worthy of respect and compassion. So that is the value that we strive for. The other is that there's the commandment of do not put a stumbling block before the blind, and the commandment to act with kindness and consideration, particularly for those folks who might be more vulnerable or less capable of protecting themselves from harm. And that's very much going along with what Netta beautifully had said before, that it is the role of the family and the extended community to practice kindness and to protect and to pave a way for folks. Do we do it well? I'm certainly not able to speak to the wider religious world or secular world. We know that there are problems with that. If it was so actionable, we would not have what we have now, which are true challenges faced by people with disabilities and their families. And I believe that we have unique families and wonderful supports that help people optimize their potential and opportunities. But we know that people with disabilities face dehumanization, discrimination, and segregation. We know it. It happens every day. It happens when they can't get inside their house of worship because there are steps leading there. It happens when they get inside their house of worship and there are not prayer books with large texts or ability to have either a closed caption or a sign language interpreter or some way to be inclusive of people who have vision or hearing loss. We know that there are times where our Jewish educational resources, our secular resources are not adequate to address the learning needs for the children and the adults and their families. So that is too long an answer, Tom. I'm sorry.
No apologies at all. Very substantial and appreciated. Topher, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think this is probably a hard question for all of us to answer, knowing that all of our traditions have a lot of diversity in them. For the Christian tradition, we often use our equivalent would be Imago Dei, which comes from the Latin for the image of God. And that certainly does shape some of our theology for how we think through the support and care of particular people, and in this case, in the context of disability, disabled people, still representing the image of God, and therefore we have an opportunity when we're at our best. We view it as an opportunity to serve and care for one another in a way that displays the love of God and the presence of God in us and around us. I will also say, I think, and this might be more unique to the Christian tradition because of our history in America and in Canada, the North American context, because we've had much more of this sort of hegemonic hold in history, we had the numbers, we've kind of historically had control of a lot of the social institutions. I think a lot of our care that families provided historically was sort of outsourced to these Christian institutions that took over the care and sort of pushed family members out and separated families from their aging parents, from children with developmental disabilities. And so the care for, as our scripture says it, the care for the widows and the orphans, which really means the care for family members and kin who need support, that has sort of always had a twofold issue within Christianity. On one hand, it's expected for people to directly provide that care for their family members at all levels, from children up through aging parents. But on the other hand, we've also institutionalized it and have removed some of that agency from families. And we've asked people to kind of go out into these institutions. And we're seeing now a few decades of deinstitutionalization happening. And the Christian faith is really having to come to a reckoning of what do we do now and how do we best provide support in this sort of new way that mirrors maybe more ancient practices. So I think that's a complexity that we have that comes on the heels of the social progress we've made, where we've understood that institutionalization might not be the healthiest way of caring for one another. And now we're starting to see families taking that mantle up again. But we do that sometimes really well and sometimes not so well. And that's probably true for all of us.
It really is, Topher. And those challenges that people find in the community are now, those challenges are in our faith communities as well. And as you say, we're dealing with that more and more as people with disabilities become more included in the community and in the faith community. One of the things that I was struck by was your mention of the Imago Dei, and then also Jerry's slide. And it reminded me of a question Rabbi Julia Watts-Belzer posed that I've just never forgotten it, is, what if God came to your church or came to your faith community in a wheelchair? And it just brings up so many different thoughts. But I guess the main one is every child, every person with a disability is God coming to our faith community. And so it's on us to be able to provide those supports. And you also mentioned some of the challenges in our society, the shame, some of the other issues that we deal with. And now, as people come into our faith communities, some of those same challenges are there too, for people with disabilities and their families. So I guess my question is, what ways can faith communities promote inclusion and acceptance and support for families and people with disabilities as they navigate their spiritual journey with our congregations? So what can we do about it, I guess, is a simple question.
I think that sometimes we can't presume that people know what to do. And I think that it's really fair to say we all need to learn together. We are learning communities. And so being able to help people in a faith community understand that that there is dignity in being able to access a bathroom. And it is very challenging, and certainly people go, but it costs so much money. But let's think of the problem together for the person in the wheelchair, for the older adult who's having difficulty navigating, for a child who is just learning. What can we do to make a facility welcoming and accessible? And catering to basic human needs is one way. And sometimes we have to do it as an educational process. People don't automatically know what autism is. They don't know what to expect from behaviors and what helps and what doesn't help.
Yes, unless they've been there and know somebody that's going through it, they just really don't know. Nada, would you like to share some thoughts there?
Yes, definitely. So much to say on this, but I would say, like, starting with first understanding, right? Exercising empathy. I think the first step towards change is educating ourselves by listening and validating other voices around us. So it's critical to show solidarity with those who are overlooked and underserved, and understand that have been struggling, right? I will be educated about your lived experience. I will work against anything that harms you. Tell me how to do better. I feel you, I hear you, I see you. So I always say, you know, showing up better for the disability community, changing our social conditioning. You know, we need to shift the narrative around disabilities and focus on discussions that address lack of inclusion and accommodation in our communities. Upholding social justice is essential to our humanity. Again, changing the narrative. Again, what, you know, she said about unlearning and relearning, that's so powerful. You know, we live in an ableist society, and understanding how we can create external environments to better support, you know, people whose bodies and minds work differently, right? I always say differently abled. Yeah, so I would say that, and language is very important as well, right? Language shapes culture and tradition, and again, working against ableism, I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Nada. Topher.
Yeah, I love the idea of starting with education, this retraining ourselves and developing this almost new muscle memory of how we engage with one another, how we show up for one another. I love the way that you've all put that. I also would add to it that I think when we talk about changing our care for one another in an institutional setting like a faith community, it can sound really scary because we all know change is really hard and sometimes not easily done when you've got a whole lot of voices pouring into something, when you've got committees who are voting on things, taking it to boards who are taking it for approval to someone else, and things can quickly feel unmanageable. So I think one thing that we can always do is, as an individual, you can find some toolkits. You can quickly Google language around disability access, and you can equip yourself to rethink a little bit just on an individual level, because that's very low hanging fruit. It's very easy, and you can find tons of great things online that are free. You could also look for Finn, and Finn can help supply some of those things. But also from an institutional standpoint, I think it's also important we acknowledge we won't get it right, because there isn't necessarily a right to arrive at. The journey matters, being able to go alongside with somebody and develop that sense of knowing who they are and knowing what their needs are. You don't get a handout and it just says, these are my needs, go do it. You might get a handout that says, here are some supports that I need. But to truly know someone and to involve them and bring them alongside in your community, it takes a long, long time. And there isn't just a shortcut you can go do and get it right. So I think we have to free ourselves from that pressure and acknowledge that it's okay to just start with something and to just do one thing and allow then that to spill into something else and to kind of roll the ball down the hill and see what it picks up. It takes some effort to get it started, and then it also takes a lot of willingness to change and listen and say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I will do better. But sometimes people don't know to tell us what they need until they've seen us do some work that shows that we're trustworthy, that we're trying, and that we are open to these discussions. So I think give yourself the freedom to just start with something and try something, put something in motion, and it will show people that you care, and then prove that you care by listening and reflecting and asking for forgiveness when you've done it wrong, and then truly change. I think that's something all faith communities can do. We all acknowledge that none of us are perfect, and certainly we all are in need of change and forgiveness for one another and from one another.
Well, thank you for those insights. And I think you're exactly right. One of the things that we need is the willingness of faith communities and the congregations in those communities to learn. And you're right, there's no cookie cutter way to do everything, or there's no cookie cutter way to address the needs of somebody with a disability, because everybody's different and the way we address those are going to be different as well. But just to try something and we'll figure it out as we go is a huge step. Now, all of you have had experience working with family members. And so I want to just focus on the family members for a second. And what do you think, how do you think faith communities can meet some of those needs of parents and meet some of those needs of siblings and other family members? Many times grandparents are the ones taking care of, have a big role in taking care of a person with a disability. How can we support the family members and caregivers? And I know you do that with different programs. How do you think a faith community could do that? Nada, I guess we'll go with you. I think you're
Yeah,
itching to
definitely.
speak. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, going back to understanding and being cognitive of what they go through on a daily, families and caregivers as well. You mentioned something, Tom, sib shops. Sib shops are so important, right? Understanding that siblings of people with special needs and disabilities often face challenges and sacrifices as well. Understanding that there is caregiver burnout. So I would say, definitely, support circles. I always say, creating safe spaces. Sacred stories are told in safe spaces where you can, open up and talk and have that open up and dialogue and know that there's others like you, providing that emotional and spiritual uplifting as well. So definitely, I would say support circles are very, very important, and just initiatives on open dialogue and ensuring that they have what they need in order to, protect and serve that individual in their family.
Okay, thank you. Jerry, would you like to add a little bit, anything to that?
Yeah, the sib shops are great. What I find also is that sometimes siblings don't know what it looks like when they grow up. So that we've tried mentorship. So sometimes an adult sib of a person with a disability comes in and does an activity with the sibs in sib shop to go, I do that too. I'm an accountant. I'm a teacher. I'm a mother. But I also have a brother or a sister with a disability, and they can look and see themselves going forward. And sometimes when you have less frequent roles, it's good to get a chance to preview and ask questions and just know that you're not on this journey by yourself. So that's one thing that I find. I think the idea of being able to find other people on similar paths is just a rich opportunity, and to understand that everybody's path is different. And I think, Topher, you said it so well, that you have to do it with humility, that none of us, that there needs to be a freedom that we're all going to make mistakes in terms of the faith-based community, and that we all have room to learn and to try to do it better.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. And just again, kudos on talking about the siblings and just any ways to help them overcome that isolation and know that there are other people in similar situations, even though our situations are going to be different. And for those siblings to know that they have support they can have support through childhood, youth, and adulthood too. That type of support is out there. And So, I think what we hear is that, helping people to know, family members to know that they're not alone is just really, really huge. But Topher, what do you think here?
So I think my response to your question, what spiritual or religious practices can provide comfort, you can just stop it right there because for so many, I mean, everyone is a little bit different with what spiritual practices land with them and what actually provides them comfort and care. Whether they're a disabled person or caring for a person with disability or their family caregiver or they're anyone, whatever the relationship is, we are all a little bit different. So part of it goes back to what Nada kind of brought out of you've got to deeply know one another to know what will be meaningful, what will actually provide that care. And people, myself included, we might not know what actually brings us care. So I think the faith community allowing for growth and flexibility and uncertainty in someone else's faith life is key to allow them to say, you know what, for years, having access to in-person worship has been so central to my faith and has brought me so much care. And in order to access that, I needed somebody to sit with my kids, or I needed somebody to provide accessible transportation, or I needed a group of people to help lift a wheelchair into this space. And now I'm determining that actually there's something different that is landing differently for my own spiritual health that is more meaningful or meaningful in a different way. So allowing our families the flexibility, just like any of our families, to grow and to change and to be different over the course of their spiritual journey, I think helps a lot. The other thing the word that keeps bringing to mind is Sabbath, just a period of rest. So many of our families are tasked with being full-time caregivers, full-time advocates, full-time educators, full-time OTs and PTs, and they have to do so much just to keep their heads above water, when that's already hard for anyone. And so just to give a break, to send people over to come over and do your laundry and make meals, or to just sit with people and let them have space to breathe, where they don't have to do all of the things all the time. I think that for many people who are in caregiving positions, because caregiving burnout is so real, Sabbath is probably a spiritual practice that lands with a lot of them.
And providing those opportunities for respite and Sabbath and just giving people the time that they need to renew themselves, recharge, and go on a date. If they're married, spend time with friends, and so important there. One of the things I wanted to ask all of you is, I know that you have that Musson has some great programs, and in the Jewish faith, I know that there's so many Jewish organizations that do such great work with people with disabilities. It's not really, I'm not leaving Christianity out, but it's a broad field too. But it's not incumbent, I think, on the faith communities to recreate these in every faith community. How can our faith communities maybe partner, collaborate with other agencies that are doing similar work, so we don't have to repeat that or recreate it, but we can benefit from what's already being done? And so, Musson has so many programs. It's just so impressive, and the outreach, the work that you do. How do you collaborate with mosques and support them?
So I would say building bridges, right? So again, establishing strong networks, not just amongst faith-based organizations, but also other institutions that are in, capacity of responsibility. joint programs and workshops are very important. Even today, this initiative, it's not just a conversation, it's a call to action, resource sharing, advocacy and policy change. This is all really, really important. So I would say, and understanding like our diversity and embracing and enjoying the differences. Intersectionality is very important as well. What we spoke about is understanding people. You know, People are complex and multifaceted with many, interwoven attributes making up their identity. Disability is just one part of a person's identity. It may shape them, but not define them. And then I would say like representation matters, right? Inviting everyone to have a seat at the table and ensuring that those institutions and organizations are also aligned with that mission where everyone has a seat at the table and everyone has a voice.
Okay, thank you. So important. That visibility and representation to be included in all the planning processes, and nothing about us without us. Okay, Jerry, your faith has such a rich. In fact, I think I know more Jewish organizations doing disability work than I know Christian organizations. So I know you have a lot to offer here. So let us know some of your thoughts.
So I think that it doesn't work really well when you do things only separately, because the goal for our work with our participants is to be included in society, which means having a purpose, having a life, having a path that is defined by involvement with the wider society. So being able to do things together, for example, volunteer initiatives that helping people access the workforce for our youth with disabilities as they go forward, to be as optimally educated as possible. Those pathways get forged by working together with others. So in any situation in which it's been a Jewish community initiative, many of them are secular in nature, so that people of different faith pathways can participate, but also to work in concert with others, communities, so that there is representation, there is the ability to speak with others and to learn and grow together. One thing that came out of our faith community, but which is now international in scope, is the Real Abilities Film Festival, which are films that are done by and for it's for the people with disabilities and the wider communities, but usually the artists and the directors and producers all have involvement with disability, and they're outstanding. So they're around in lots and lots of cities and countries.
Okay, thank you. And we actually did a webinar praying with Leor.
Yes, that was the first one. That was the first.
We had his father on, and we were hoping to get Leor on, but schedules didn't work out. But very touching, very well done, and opens a lot of eyes just by being there. And so thank you. Topher, what do you think?
Yeah, fully affirm the ability to cross-pollinate and work alongside one another. I don't want to say like work across the aisle as if we are in opposition. We're not. And that's a helpful reminder of just because we have different faith practices in certain ways doesn't mean that we don't equally care in other ways, and that we can learn from incredible work that's happening in secular settings and in faith settings that are different than our own. And in fact, when we can have that not just as a tool, like a bag that we can reach into and grab and say, oh, there's a really great toolkit here from Musin that we're going to grab, but to think of it more as a conversation that we get to have, and by having that conversation, we're strengthening our own voice just as we're strengthening our ability to listen to one another. I think if we frame it more like that, as this ongoing partnership, we also get to reframe it as something that's consistent. And that's what I think so many of our families need, is the consistency of care. When we can provide them a great momentary provision of access, that's wonderful. But they have lives for the other 6 days a week, or for the other 364 days of the year. And so what are we doing to care for them consistently? If we have a wider network, if we've got more to draw from, if we're having more conversations, we are better equipped to meet all of their diverse needs. And so, yeah, reach out to I think don't be scared by anyone's label or title. Find a resource, and then whoever they are, kind of takes a back seat to the purpose of them sharing that with you. So if you don't know theologically how your faith fits with another faith, that's okay. Because what really matters is that you're both working together on the care of other people. So yeah, I think that would be my advice to a faith-based organization, is don't be afraid. It's not scary. And even if it is scary, it's okay to be scared a little bit, because everyone is actually super wonderful and the work they're doing is incredible.
Great advice, Topher. Thank you. Well, I've enjoyed hearing all of your thoughts, and I think we have a few questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to pose some of the questions that the audience may have.
Well, so far we have a comment, and I have a few questions to ask, but everyone can feel free to put their questions into the Q&A if you have some. The comment, which I will read, is from Cindy. She says, "Thanks for mentioning siblings. Sibling support is often overlooked, not just in churches or congregations, but outside of them. The siblings' needs are also different across the lifespan. Children's siblings often don't even know how to communicate their questions and what they're experiencing. Then they grow up to become adult siblings who think that this is how it is, and they don't know that they're not alone." Very well summarized. Does anyone have a comment about that?
It's real. It's real. And in terms of sibling work, it's kind of new. 25 years ago, we didn't really have as many sibling groups or sibling options. So that you have adult siblings today who never grew up with it, whose parents were parenting in a world that was far less accepting of them. So when you have older adults who are taking care of adult children with disabilities, their experience is different than younger families. So the idea of recognizing the impact of disability across the lifespan and maintaining a historical perspective kind of grounds us in understanding where we are on this journey.
Jerry, could you say just a little more because I know you have so much experience over time with like how have you seen it change and what are families getting now that they weren't getting before?
So I began my work as a professional in 1975 when there were huge institutions where people with disabilities were warehoused, where their fundamental human rights were being violated. And so the deinstitutionalization of people happened within my lifetime. And you have families, and I was an adult. So you have families who had placed their child there because that's what they were told to do, who never had schools available to them, where educational programs weren't available, and the sibling had a different experience. So combine that today, where I'm working with families whose children have diagnoses when they leave the hospital. It's a very different place. And there's an early intervention team ready to be there with them. So you have families in their 70s, their 80s, parents who have worked tirelessly on behalf of the person with disabilities that they are supporting in their family, having that sense of both guilt and pride, because many of them have done enormously amazing things. But it's different, you know, each generation brings something new to the mix.
Mm, and I wanted to ask, could Nada and Jerry, could you talk a little, just briefly, like not all the details of the programs, but in terms of the needs that you're addressing, would you say that it's more emotional, it's more practical, it's more spiritual? And could you also mention about the faith aspect or yeah, that aspect of it too, if how that is incorporated or like religious values, something like that.
Yes, definitely. So Jerry answered that so beautifully, but just to add on top of it, I mean, it's real and it's broad, right? It's a case by case scenario depending on, age, maturity, disability, severity. And I mean, this is new, right? She said it, it's very new. This is just kind of up and coming. There's this beautiful light being shined, and I'm so here for it, right? Because again, I've never heard of sib shops or any sibling support, being in the disability landscape as much as I have in the last 5 years. And I think it's beautiful to see this all unfolding. And I think, again, providing multifolds like emotional support, mental support, understanding what they are going through and acknowledging it is very important. And also, educating and teaching parents on also how to accept that as well. There, as Jerry had mentioned, there's a lot more acceptance in early intervention, and now we're getting better every year, which is amazing, and we're seeing these beautiful initiatives, and we just want to support them and expand them, and we're learning as we go. I would say in regards to faith tradition, obviously, prayer support groups, mentioning this in our large spaces as well, and just acknowledging it. And again, I always go back to safe spaces. Stories are told in safe spaces. So having that open forum for people to share their experiences is very, very important.
So in the groups themselves, or would you say it's support groups, the program, like people
Yeah.
are discussing and sharing mostly?
Yeah, having specific programs just for siblings is extremely imperative. I found that they've been really, really beneficial, and so much is shared and poured out. So much emotion is shared when you do have those. I remember our first sib shop. I took so it was so impactful just because there was so much emotion shared, and I just thought, well, these siblings are we've created a platform for them, but imagine all the other people that we haven't reached. So yeah, I think it's just such a good step in the right direction.
I'm glad you mentioned like the emotional aspect, and I was wondering, um, after I will ask Topher directly because he has a personal experience, but first for Jerry or Nada, is there an example that you can think of in a program or a group where, you know, emotions really came out, and what type of emotions? I know, Jerry, you mentioned guilt, and also, I don't know if that's exactly an emotion, but yeah,
Well,
like,
guilt is, I think, for sure an emotion. Um, I think I think what I'd like to kind of focus on is when in my work as a synagogue inclusion specialist, I would go to different synagogues in the New York metro area and work with inclusion committees. And inclusion committees usually were fired up by the parents of people with disabilities, adults with disabilities themselves, and then congregational leaders and a member of the clergy. And so it was a formation. And some of it was, well, what do we do? Our congregation loves quiet, meditative time. What do we do? And the parents of children with autism were saying that sometimes their children's behavior was not predictable, but that the child loves coming, loves the music, loves to be there in presence with other people. And when everybody is turning to them and going, shh, 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 they feel that there's no place for them, that they just want to curl up at that point in time, and they feel rejected. And so one of the things that we worked on with several congregations was to have a just a box of STEM toys in the back of the congregation so that a youngster could play with the smushy ball or deal with the puzzle piece and calm themselves and be better able. And it was kind of a gift from the congregation to be there. It wasn't like the parent had to pack a satchel when they left. There were things that say, I accept you. And then when we had a child or family where the behavior was such that it was really a difficult space, but the family was also in mourning for a loved one and they wanted to be there. So we created a safe, quiet space in an area of the synagogue where the services were piped in and the child and family or a family member or a teen volunteer or a friend could be there with the child to be in a safe and good space so that they would participate. So it's trying to find that place for every person at different moments. So that's one example I can give you of how we problem solved with an inclusion committee.
mm, that's right. I've read and heard that a lot of families, the parents especially, they feel very self-conscious and or embarrassed, to share their needs, or when their child does something that's, drawing attention, something like that. So that's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing. Um, I want to ask Topher a question because he has personal experience in caregiving for a family member, and I wanted to know, feel free to, based on your comfort about, personal details, but um, what would you say? And I've read your book recently. What were some of the positive aspects, and also, of course, the challenges of being, a caregiver, and a family member, like personally, and what types of lessons did you come away with, or the types of traits maybe you developed? I'm thinking of, patience, empathy, these types of things, but especially, what are some of the positive aspects or the really challenging aspects that stood out for you?
Okay, I will try and go super fast because that could be, 10 different hour long lectures.
Oh, okay.
But I actually wrote down a couple of things that I just felt like it was really important to say out loud because I don't think we've said them so far, but I think we're all probably on the same page. But we've talked a lot about caregiving and also naming some self-advocacy more recently. And I think it's important we name that caregiving and self-advocacy are not separate, but that there are so often self-advocates who still are receiving care from families, and that caregivers need to be advocates, but also the care receivers having space to advocate. Let's not draw any lines between care and advocacy. That they're kind of hand in hand. And I think we've talked around that enough, but I just wanted, for anyone hearing it, I wanted to make sure that was explicit. And then I just loved what Jerry said about the fidgets in the back, because we also do that in my tradition. And that visibility, and I'll tie this back into your question here, but that visibility helps to normalize that disability is expected and even desired in our spaces, which means whenever the person you're caring for, or when you yourself have violated some social norm within that face setting, and you start to feel embarrassed, it's easier to remember, wait a second, they anticipated this. They knew this was going to happen. They knew I was going to be here. They knew this person I care for is going to be here. We're not disrupting. We're here because we are supposed to be here. And I think that helps to calm some of that sense of guilt and embarrassment and those immediate reactions that we have where you get hot and flushed and you're like, oh no, I've done something wrong. My child has said something during a moment of silence, or I had a tic and I couldn't control it when a time whenever I should have been still. So I think that visibility really helps. And I'll give you an example of this in a different context. So my father was a quadriplegic before he passed. He lived as a quadriplegic for about 10 years. And so he could navigate life physically by using his powered wheelchair, but he needed to take pressure breaks periodically in order to offset the weight pressing down on him as he was sitting, right? If we sit for too long, our legs get tired. He needed to take pressure breaks, but he couldn't stand up. So rather than standing up and walking around, he would tilt his whole chair backwards and basically be laying down wherever he was in his powered wheelchair. And that takes up a lot of space in a different way than maybe a manual wheelchair does. And certainly a different way of using up your space than when you're driving that wheelchair. And so the church that I grew up in, that he was still participating in during his accident and life as a quadriplegic, they took the pews, the big heavy wooden pews that were bolted to the ground, and they took a chainsaw and chopped some of those pews in half to carve out space that you can put a wheelchair into. And they intentionally asked and said, how much space do you need? Can you measure your chair? And then whenever they realized, oh, but it's not just your chair, it's also the ability to lean back in the middle of service and take a pressure break and be laying prone. So then they cut more to make an even bigger space. And every time I walked into that space and you saw the gaps, because they put them on multiple locations and so that you could choose where you sat, and so that if other people who needed that space showed up, it would be there for them. When you walked in and you saw those gaps, it was this visible reminder that other people not just anticipated someone's presence, but that they truly loved that person enough that their beautiful, symmetrical wooden pews were not precious enough to keep the way they were. That there was something about this person that they cared more deeply about and their belonging and participation than the symmetry of how the pews look in a photo. That nothing was so sacred in this sanctified place that it was more sacred than the person. And I think that is one of the best lessons that you could learn from a faith community was what is truly important, what is truly sacred, what matters, and where do we find God? We don't find God in a beautifully ornate wooden pew. It can be beautiful, it can point us, art is wonderful, but if it's coming at the expense of the participation of someone, it's a barrier, and that's a barrier to God. And God, I don't believe, is in those barriers that exclude. I believe God is in the inclusion of people. And so, yeah, I think that visual reminder of even if he wasn't there, the space is still there for him. Even if no one's using the fidget toys, they're still out there. If you put a set of headphones, we have an organ, it's really loud. I set noise canceling headphones out every Sunday with a sign that says if the organ's too loud, use these. No one has taken them up yet, but they've been out there for over a year, and it's just a visible sign that people matter more than the way we've organized it. So I think that's the biggest lesson I would take away from being a caregiver in a faith community. And I think that hopefully is applicable to a lot of us, just to know that the visibility really matters and really says something.
Just one other part about, what are the not lessons, but like what are the most you know kind of memorable things in terms of like positive experiences that you got from, the caregiving, or like what kind of stood out, over time to you, that you thought back, oh, I really developed so much in this way, or I learned so much in this way, like that.
Yeah, I think another thing is, so I'm a runner, and that's what I do. That's how I, like, mentally I need to run. It helps me process, and physically I always feel better. It's really hard to move fast whenever you're traveling with somebody who uses a motorized wheelchair, because not only are they limited to the speed of the chair, but also the way they navigate our built environment is often really tedious and slow, and they have to go slow over bumps. They've got to go around in ways to get up steps because ramps only exist in one spot. And so you just are so slow. And it was really hard for me because I like to be efficient and I like to, park close and zoom in, and, it's all about efficiency and speed. And I think being a caregiver can be so frustrating because it's constant and it's really hard work, but it's really slow work. And so things like feeding him lunch, because he could eat on his own, but he couldn't use hands. So you have to feed him a sandwich, right? It takes so long and it's so drawn out, but it opened me up as somebody who was just so wanting to be fast all the time and wolfs my foods down. It opened me up to a new way of experiencing time in a slower way. And so now I feel like I have the gift of being able to go slow and fast depending on, the needs of the day. And I feel like that was a huge gift that caregivers maybe we need to do a better job of telling caregivers that there are perks, that there are wonderful things about this life that you can only really see and access by living it, and that it will be really hard. Sometimes hard things have a lot of beauty and expose you to new ways of living, new patterns of thinking, and even new ways of moving through the world that you might not otherwise get. Um, and maybe that will make it less scary for caregivers, make it easier for people to name their own needs, um, easier for self advocates to announce what they need because they trust that other people aren't just constantly giving to them, but are also receiving something from being in relationship. And so I think that there's this mutuality inherent to caregiving that we need to do a better job of uplifting. And as a people of faith, we have the language for that. We have the language for talking about how hard things can be met with love and care, and we can emerge from the hard things with a newfound appreciation for the work that God is doing in our lives.
Thank you for, sharing sort of the positive side and, your own experience too. Really appreciate that. And we have two questions for Nada, so I'll try to put them together. Well, someone was praising all the amazing work that Mussin is doing for the Muslim community, so appreciate that. One question is about Muslim Umrah. I don't know this word, so perhaps you could define that for us. How do you do family inquiries about Umrah? Is that service currently available in Canada and or the US? And the second question is for the SIB shop program, do you use it in a secular way or more in a religious faith context? So those are the two questions about Umrah and about the SIB shops.
Okay, so yes, so Umrah, for those of you who don't know, is a pilgrimage that Muslims do, where we go to the Holy Kaaba, which is in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and we perform pilgrimage there. It can be very difficult for families who have individuals who are differently abled. So something beautiful about our organization is we have 2 Umrahs a year where we take caregivers and individuals with disabilities and their families. It is a big operation. There is a lot of time and management and sensitivity that goes into it because it's such a long journey. And I actually attended this past November, and Topher sparked something in me when he was talking about dealing with people on a daily in that experience and the emotional intelligence. I think that word really stuck out to me that you gain from being in those spaces. Is something invaluable, right? Being with someone all the time, and I'm a runner as well, so I can relate to that. Being with someone and going at a slower pace definitely has just my emotional intelligence has just really, really expanded. And again, Mohsin Umrah is a beautiful experience. We take families who wouldn't readily get the opportunity to travel on this journey, and we take them. So you can find all of that information on the website. You can actually sign up and do an intake form, and we will contact you. And then the second question for the SIB shop, I would say it's twofold. It's faith inspired, but we also want to acknowledge that people have different emotions, right? So guilt, we talked about, you had mentioned the various emotions. We do want to recognize, that there is a lot of guilt and other emotions that can be under the mental health scope, and want to address that as well. But obviously it can be, I would say it's faith inspired, but not faith based in regards to those SIB shops. And again, our programs and services are not just for the Muslim community. They're with anyone who identifies with a disability And what we've seen in the past few years is everyone, from different faith groups who have attended our programs, and they're welcome, and we provide service to them as well.
And Jerry, for the parent and the sibling groups for the Jewish community, is that mostly secular, or is there some Jewish content in those programs?
Within the support programs, there's usually not Jewish content. That ends up, are there cultural references? But there are people will talk about life cycle events or coming up to a marriage and the different parts of things. But we've had people from lots of different faith perspectives. I think having a family member with a disability or having a disability for oneself is an equalizer, because all you want to do is to be able to connect with somebody who's experiencing similar things as you. So I find it quite ecumenical in spirit within the community. The best example I can use happens with both to be about people with disabilities themselves. I was very fortunate to run a social recreational program for adults with disabilities. And initially, it was spearheaded by some young people with physical disabilities. And they were quite angry when people having different types of disabilities wanted to enter this adult program. And there was some resistance, and people from different faith traditions would come in. And my feeling was, number one, I worked for a YMYWHA. We have a charter as being a secular organization. We might be funded by Jewish funders, but it's secular. And they were to be invited. Well, ultimately, I ended up having more marriages coming from that social recreational program for adults with disabilities than the singles worker did. I was quite proud of it. And people met. We wouldn't ordinarily think that it was across disability, it was visible disabilities, it was not visible disabilities. There were people who just felt comfortable in the disabilities community, and they came and they had a fun time. And to this day, we have people who are met and married, or met and had good friendships and added purpose and relationship and connection to their lives. So it was a tremendously fulfilling part of being an offering to the community.
Which group was that, Jerry?
It functions under the title Life. It is a program that you would find now at the Goral JCC in Cedarhurst, New York. And there's also a program similar to that called Adaptations at the Marlene Mayerson JCC of Manhattan. And these are social recreational programs for adults with disabilities across a range of disabilities.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize two points that you were just saying. Number one, the aspect of the relationship building and the community building for families to get to know one another and support each other. I feel like that's really important. And also what you just mentioned about the wide range of disabilities, that also might not be easy to incorporate so many different types of areas into support. So that could be, another topic that we discuss later, which we didn't quite get into because there's such a wide range. of disabilities, like you said, invisible and physical and cognitive and all kinds. So that could be another topic for another time. I see somebody just added one question, which is a quick question. Is there a way for people to be trained as facilitators for sibling groups or family support groups?
Tom, don't you do training for SIP shops?
Yes, I'll jump in here. The organization that I was with previously does 1 to 2 facilitator trainings, and I believe they're doing that online this year. And so some of it is in person. It's great if it could be in person, but I think they're doing more online. So if you will maybe private message me or send me your email, I can forward that to our organization, and they can let you know the next time that they have a SIP shop facilitator training. You can also go to their website at siblingsupport.org, and they'll have a list of trainings that are scheduled throughout the year as well. So, but yes, it's find a training to go to. They're expensive to put on, but they're the best trainings I've ever been to be honest. So thank you for asking that question, and we can get that information to you.
Well, I think that's all the questions that we had for now. So, um, Tom, would you like to wrap up maybe?
Sure. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation and want to thank everybody, Nada and Jerry and Topher, Rebecca. Um, you guys are my people, and it would be so much fun to spend time in the same room, just visiting and talking and sharing. But thank you for making this such a wonderful experience and for sharing and for letting us know your thoughts about things and how we can work together and how we can work just to make things better for our families that have kids or care for people with disabilities. Um, so this is recorded, and I will send that out to everybody, and as well as to our participants if you want to share it as well. And just one announcement that next Thursday at 1:30 we will have the Reverend Dr. Sarah, Reverend Dr. Sarah and Lund, and she's just written a book called Blessed Minds about neurodiversity. So along with our mental health month, and we feel like this family support that you're all doing is a big part of mental health for our families. But she'll be talking about how we can talk better and how we can kind of meet the needs of those who are neurodiverse. So that will be coming up as an author interview next Thursday. And we do have more things planned for multi-faith roundtable discussions and panel discussions just like this. So we'll also keep you informed and let you know about that. So again, thank you. May God bless you and all the work that you're doing in Canada, Jerry, and in your neck of the woods, and Topher, you as well, and Rebecca. We'll keep working together, plotting forward, and making life better for those with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.